It's the second rest day. There's only 1 week of the tour left, and the first 2 weeks have been very exciting. This has been the most exciting start to a Tour de France that I can remember in recent history. So, in this video, I'm just going to take a quick look at what happened last week and take a look forward at the week ahead. Stage 11 was a sprint. It was won by Caleb Ewan, and if you remember, this was a bit of a surprise because it was a downhill finish on this sprint. Stage 12 had two Category 1 climbs, but it finished on the downhill, and there was no GC action. We saw the GC guys were saving themselves for the time trial, and Simon Yates took the victory from the breakaway. In the Stage 13 time trial, Julian Alaphilippe surprised everybody again. Most people probably expected him to lose at least 30 seconds, maybe a minute to Geraint Thomas, but he took the victory. Stage 14 finished atop the Tourmalet, and Thibaut Pinot took the victory. He looked to be the strongest of the GC climbers, and this was another surprise for Alaphilippe. He finished only 6 seconds behind, and he actually gained time on Geraint Thomas here. On stage 15, Simon Yates took another victory from the breakaway. Thibaut Pinot continued to look like the strongest climber, and Alaphilippe showed his first signs of weakness, getting dropped on that final climb. Here's the GC after 2 weeks of racing. Alaphilippe remains on top. He has a minute and 35 seconds of an advantage over Geraint Thomas. Kruijswijk is in third, and Pinot has been climbing up the standings. He's a minute and 50 seconds back. So that's how it stands right now. Let's take a look at that third week and see what's coming up. Stage 16, it's one for the sprinters, and this is probably good news for Alaphilippe. He gets the rest day, plus this is an easier day. He can ease back into it, hopefully recover, and be stronger for the mountain stages to come. My pick for this stage is Dylan Groenewegen. Elia Viviani was doing work in the mountains for Alaphilippe, so he might be a little bit tired. Caleb Ewan had a crash on a downhill a few days ago, so just because of that, I'm going to take Groenewegen for the victory. Stage 17, it's a transition stage. There's that Category 3 climb towards the end, and it finishes on the downhill. Earlier on, this is the kind of stage that Alaphilippe was taking time on, but you have to assume that he'll be saving his energy from this point on. Here's stage 18, and this is the first of 3 very difficult mountain stages in a row. We've heard a lot that there's a lot of elevation, there's a lot of time over 2,000 meters in this tour, and you'll see all 3 of these last 3 climbs go over 2,000 meters. Some riders handle this better than others. Alejandro Valverde, he's well known that he doesn't perform well at altitude, so we'll just have to see if that plays a role. There's a Cat 1, 2 HC climbs, but you see it finishes on a downhill. That's a little bit of a letdown, but we've seen that Alaphilippe's team is not built for the mountains, and he's been isolated. So if he's isolated earlier on in this stage, there could be fireworks. Stage 19, it's a short stage, 126.5 kilometers, and they packed 5 categorized climbs into that, and it also finishes on an uphill. And again, elevation could play a role here. There are 2 climbs that are over 2,000 meters, and it finishes above 2,000 meters. So I'm going to take a look at the final climb. There is a flat section at the top of the climb, and that's a little bit discouraging to me. However, there was a similar situation on stage 15. I thought that would discourage attacks, but Pinot attacked from 6K out and took some valuable time on his rivals. So we've seen recently, with Team Ineos not being as dominant as they were, guys are encouraged to attack from farther out, and those attacks can actually stick. Stage 20, this is the last chance for the GC to shake up, and it looks like it could shake up. It's 130 kilometers, a fairly short stage, but again, they packed it full of action. There's a Category 1 climb to start. This is a long climb, almost 20K at 6%, and it finishes just below 2,000 meters. And then that finishing climb is just very, very long, again finishing over 2,000 meters. It's 33.4K at 5.5%. Let's take a look at that one. As I said in my preview video, 5.5% doesn't sound like much, but if you take a closer look at the climb, you'll notice that it's a stair stepper. So there are some downhill sections, and there's that shallow section towards the middle that really bring down the average gradient of this climb. There's a lot of red on this climb, and the red sections are between 6 and 9%. So there are opportunities for guys to make some attacks on this climb. Another thing to keep in mind is that Team Ineos hasn't been as strong as we've seen in recent years, so they haven't been just making their train and riding a steady tempo up the climbs. This would be a perfect climb for them to do that here, but they haven't looked strong, so there could be more action on this climb than we would have expected before the race started. Stage 21, as usual, is a parade and it finishes with a sprint in Paris. Here's another look at the GC, and a question on everybody's mind is, can Alaphilippe hang on to yellow for this difficult final week? He has a few things in his favor and a few things going against him. What he has in his favor big time is that Team Ineos does not look as strong as they used to look. Now, can they come back stronger in the third week? Maybe, but Geraint Thomas hasn't looked strong, and Bernal, I thought he would perform better on the climbs than he has. So neither one of those two guys is really stepping up, and their team as a whole isn't strong in doing their Ineos train and just shedding everybody from the climbs. So that's a good thing in his favor. Also, you see Pinot in fourth place. He had that bad day in the crosswinds and lost a minute and 40 seconds. So Pinot still has a whole lot of time to make up if Alaphilippe is to lose. So those are a few things in his favor. However, the big thing working against him is his team. Quick Step is strong, don't get me wrong. They win more races than anybody, but they're more of a classics team, one-day race team. They came here for a split team with sprint victories and stage wins in mind. So they're not built for these mountainous stages. And the one guy that Alaphilippe could have counted on in the mountains was Enric Mas. But Mas had a bad day on stage 15 and got dropped and lost, I think, about 20 minutes. So Alaphilippe has been isolated, and with all of these guys in the top five, they're not separated by much time. So he's going to have to cover a lot of different attacks, and that could wear him out. The fact that Ineos isn't as strong this year actually works for and against Alaphilippe. The way it works against him is, if Ineos was still strong, he could just hop onto their train and no one would be able to attack from behind. But now that Ineos hasn't been doing that for the first 2 weeks, he has to worry about attacks coming from everywhere. In my mind, there are just too many factors working against Alaphilippe. He spent a lot of energy early on in the race. He doesn't have a team that's built to protect him, and we saw that he showed signs of weakness on stage 15. So I think that he is going to lose yellow, and when he does crack, I think he's going to crack pretty spectacularly and lose a lot of time. So if that happens, Geraint Thomas would move up into the first position here. However, Geraint Thomas, we all know he didn't have an ideal spring like he had last year, and then he crashed out of the Tour de Suisse. So does he just have a lack of race Ks in his legs, and he's not as strong as he would have been otherwise? Or could that play into his favor, and will he be fresh heading into that third week? We'll just have to wait and see. There really hasn't been a clear indication of who is better, him or Bernal. They've both shown signs of weakness, so they still have a two-pronged attack, which could work for them or it could work against them. But the main factor working against Thomas is that Team Ineos just hasn't looked as strong as they've looked in the past. On the other hand, take a look at Kruijswijk and his team, Team Jumbo-Visma. They've probably been the strongest team in this race. And for the past two mountain stages, when it really came down to it, Kruijswijk had two teammates with him, when Alaphilippe had either one or none, and Thomas and Bernal had either one or none. So Kruijswijk, we know he's a strong guy, a diesel kind of guy. These climbs that are coming up favor him better, and he has a very strong team. So he's in pretty good position, and no one, I don't think, is really talking about him that much. And in fourth place is Thibaut Pinot. He was my pick before the race started, and he's looked to be the strongest climber. And he put in a very good individual time trial, better than we would have expected. So he's looked really strong, but that crosswind stage really cost him. He lost a minute and 40 that day. He would be so close to victory without that. But he has looked to be the strongest climber. His team has been, pretty good. Godot has been there for him when it's mattered. So if that can continue, he has some pretty good support, and he's just looked really strong. The French fans are going to be going crazy for him. Bernal is in fifth. Now he is Colombian. There's a lot of time over 2,000 meters. That should favor him. And Geraint Thomas hasn't looked as strong as he's looked in the past. However, Thomas hasn't really cracked super hard. And I think Team Ineos, when it comes down to it, they're really there in support of Thomas. So Bernal has a lot to overcome if he's going to take the victory. So then look down in sixth place, we have Emmanuel Buchmann, who another guy that no one's really talking about because he hasn't really had past results to indicate this form. But wow, Bora, they've been on a roll this year. He doesn't really have a climbing team to support him either, but there's no pressure on him. He can just continue to have a solid race, and maybe he has a shot at the podium. In seventh and eighth is the Movistar duo, Landa and Valverde. So Valverde has all of these climbs facing him that are above 2,000 meters, and that doesn't suit him at all. When it comes to Landa, he rode the Giro, and we're coming into a very difficult third week of the Tour, so might that start to wear him out. And Movistar overall, this three-man leadership thing just hasn't worked for them at all. Quintana, yesterday we saw it doesn't appear that he's willing to do any work for the team. So Movistar, I just don't see it happening. And they're pretty far back in time anyway. They're about 5 minutes back. Same goes for Fuglsang and Uran. I think they're just too far back. Uran is Colombian, so he has that going for him. But I think that's a little bit of an overstated thing that people talk about. So I really think the last guy who could possibly win in this list is Buchmann, and anyone below him I don't think has a chance. So there you have it. That's what's coming up in the third and final week. The potential is there. The route is set up to where it could be a very exciting race. It just depends on the riders and how they race it. So tune in next week, and I'll see you tomorrow.